Before you ask, no, the footage that you're seeing on the background right now is actually from my good friend, not mine, as the game seems to be very CPU hungry, more than Vermintide, and it puts my setup to around 80 degrees Celsius, and this is while I'm on the lowest possible setting while standing still on the hub town. So I'm not even going to bother recording this one for the sake of my 8-year-old computer. Anywho, Back 4 Blood is an upcoming 4-player cooperative zombie apocalypse themed first-person shooter brought to us by Turtle Rock Studios, who are responsible for none other than, that's right, Evolve. Although I keep hearing Left 4 Dead, which they did create back in 2008 under Valve, that was 13 years ago. I don't know, I always think to their previous work, and I'm not talking about the VR games, Evolve, which was back in 2015, which is far more relevant, and that game didn't fare well. Before we begin, let's get the comparisons out of the way. For starters, Back 4 Blood is a far more difficult game, mainly because of its progression and the large gaps between its difficulty, where you can find a mixture of Left 4 Dead's expert realism mixed with a little bit of Heart 8 mutation and a dash of double special spawns courtesy of Vermintide. The game also comes with this whole trauma mechanic, similar to that of Final Fantasy 15, if anyone knows that game. Basically, the more you get hit, the lower your maximum health is, and the only way to fix that is by using first aid cabinets. The zombies in this game are far faster and far more aggressive that you can't just ignore them. That's because the game doesn't really give you a shove to begin with. You do have a melee attack, but it's so useless that me and my group just starts getting the knife upgrade as our starting cards, since it's actually quite reliable at killing zombies at one hit. We'll talk more about that deck building later. The game also comes with safe room shops, ammo juggling, weapon rarities, and a bunch of weapon attachments, which I wish you can just drop manually from your gun, unless if it's red or broken. It is quite annoying to buy an attachment for your gun just to find its better colored counterpart right next to the safe room. Lastly, when it comes to major differences, this thing has mutations known as corruption cards. It's not a game mode, more of a tumor that just shows up on your game and nags you to speedrun something that you need to take slowly, unless if you want to get a fatal back massage by the many clones of Craig Jones. These mutations can be anything from a weather change, Shangri-La flashbacks, a little side quest for extra coin, armored specials, or hordes. Yeah, hordes don't come up naturally in this game, so that means you can just leisurely run around and back to the safe room on most cases, unless for that one part in Pain Train, where waiting too long at a crescendo trigger will spawn a horde. I think that's the only place where it happens. Anyways, back to difficulty. We played mostly in Veteran, along with one Survivor difficulty mission that got boring really quickly, and a few Nightmare games, which didn't last long mainly because people kept dying at the start of the game. Yeah, I feel like this game needs a few more difficulties, one between Veteran and Nightmare, and another one between Survivor and Veteran, so that people with shorter patience can give the game a good honest look, unless if you want them to be a part of the bad side of your player retention. The jump is quite drastic between the three difficulties that you just have to muscle through the second difficulty, which can be a massive turnoff for some people, which is exactly what happened to one of our mates who had enough after day 1. Veteran is quite overwhelming at first, while Nightmare is just comedically difficult that sometimes we can't even get out of the safe room without at least 2 of us dying. Now when it comes to the structure of the game, each act, I assume there's more than one, is split into multiple maps. With that in mind, you can't really experience the general gist of the game just by doing the first map, at least when it comes to the first 2 difficulties anyways. You can't even encounter most of the special infected types until you reach the 5th map, and even then, you can't even see the other types of common infected unless if you play in Nightmare. Look, I'm not calling them riddance, okay? They kept bringing up Left 4 Dead, so we're gonna be sticking with it. Speaking of Nightmare, it doesn't affect the chance of getting any better quality weapons, so you'll be fighting pinheads with weapons of the common variety if you decide to do a run from the start, which is painful. Or maybe it's not, and it's all placebo. Who knows? Speaking of guns and sharp things on the end of sticks, this game comes with your usual mix of firearms found on crates, along with a few melee weapons. One thing to note is that some weapons uses a different type of ammunition even if they are a part of the same type. like how the ranch rifle uses rifle rounds instead of sniper rounds, and how the revolver uses rifle rounds instead of pistol rounds. This means you are better off using an ammo type that your secondary, or your teammates for that matter, aren't using, since ammo found in the floor is limited, and you'll be doing a lot of tossing back and forth between your teammates later down the line. Although come to think of it, it wasn't an issue that we had, which means it can be tweaked further down the line to make the game harder. Speaking of issues though, you can't just unequip and share the attachments on any weapon that you have or found on the ground. This is quite annoying since there are weapon rarities, and sometimes you will just find a better replacement for a weapon that you just upgraded, wasting copper in the process. Yeah, there's a shop in this game, found in the end of each map. Here is where you can spend copper. Why copper? That you find while exploring the maps, or by completing the challenge that the map asks for. The shop can contain anything from a team buff, equipment upgrades, a bigger inventory, firearms, attachments, ammo, healing items, and a whole lot of equipment. Every time the run fails and has to restart though, the shops randomize, which kinda messes up with the whole consistency that the game establishes, since the corruption card stays the same, but now that sniper rifle, or that team buff that you really need for this part of the run is suddenly gone. When it comes to the story and the structure of the game, it's different from what I'm used to when it comes to these co-op games, where each map is self-contained and unrelated with the exception of their stories probably. Instead, in Back 4 Blood, the maps are played in a sequence and progress is saved in between. If an act is started on a certain point that isn't the beginning, whatever cards and coins that you would hypothetically obtain on the previous maps would be awarded before your game begins. My only problem with this structure is how it limits some of the aspects that the game can give you when it comes to playing the earlier parts, unless if you're willing to brave the toughest difficulty. This also means that you can't just play a certain map without being bombarded by upgrades and cash to put you on the same level as the challenge that the map was tailor-made for. You can't just have a blank state of a run in any of the maps unless if it's the first part of that act. Moving on to the zombies and their mutations, there are 3 specials that you'll encounter here, along with a handful of other infected that don't fall under the whole playable in versus, if you know what I mean. I'm just assuming on that last part by the way, because I took one good look at that PvP from my friend who was streaming at the time, and it's a big bowl of nope for me personally. Anywho, the 3 specials found on the beta, so far, comes with 2 variants which changes what they do. Slightly. I have a couple of issues with these special ridden. First being the fat boys and the tall boys having almost similar cries, although that could probably be fixed once we get used to their cries. The cleaners not having a far more obvious flinch to react to when you're hit, the comments hitting you before their clawing animations even begins, all of the specials not having some sort of turn rate that getting decked by an ogre always feels disheartening, the bruiser's weak point being impossible to hit, and finally, why variants? Each of the 3 specials variants looks the same with the exception of where their glowing weak point is, which I feel is a bit of a cop-out. I feel like more details can be added to them, just so that they look distinct, at a glance anyways, if improving the silhouette is deemed too much for the developers. So about that knife card, decks are your passive upgrades that you receive in the end of a map to give yourself a bit of an edge for the next, unlocked by completing a map and earning supply points, which you can use to buy more cards. This concept sorta scares me. In one hand, it's cool that you can pretty much craft your own skill tree to bring to a mission, with the first card that you place while crafting being designated as your starting passive. Also, the deck isn't random, which I thought it would be after the first card, which would explain why the vitamins card keeps haunting me. The system is great and flexible and all of that, but from what I've been hearing about this game, along with the producer and the developer's history, I'm afraid how this will be handled in the future. If it'll be monetized. Yeah, that's the fear. When it comes to our thoughts about the game, let's start with the cooperative aspects. It's pretty good, as the design of the game demands communication, as you micromanage each other into not being eaten by the next wave of infected. This also means that playing with randoms is another massive coin toss, just like in Vermintide, and playing with the AI is pretty much not viable, since they are pretty brain dead, more than the written I'd say. Now since the game asks for its players to talk it out when it comes to how to tackle the maps, having a better pinging system to what we have right now would probably help, especially when you're in the inventory and you want to quickly point out that you're out of cash or you need a certain type of ammo. The difficulty of the game could use a few more choices. I swear, don't touch Nightmare, that difficulty is fun. Just don't do it until you understand all of the BS that the game throws at you. I think the difficulty is better off locked behind some sort of requirement, like the amount of cards that you currently own, or how many times you've completed the previous difficulty. The idea of using different weapons also adds to the experience, but only for a little bit. Decreasing the amount of ammo that you can carry overall might change this, and making the whole idea of different ammunitions becoming far more meaningful. Competitively speaking, from what I've heard from my friends who dared to venture through the PvP of this game, it's bad. Not to mention that barely anyone plays it, and those who sticks around only do for one round or even less. The games can start with an incomplete lobby, or with no enemies at all. The item spawns apparently randomized between rounds, throwing away the whole competitive aspect of the game mode entirely, and it's just not that fun compared to the good old campaign versus. Their words, not mine. The gunplay is serviceable, with a few punchy effects to add to the few cathartic moments. I just wish the gun was smaller is all, and not take a good quarter of the screen. The melee weapons on the other hand are alright, but somewhat lacking. Having only a handful of them available, with no attachments to upgrade them with, is rather disappointing. Give them something fun like those found on the Techland games. Also, the machete needs a bit of work since it seems weak compared to the other melee weapons, from what I've heard. The attachment issue needs to be addressed. It's the most annoying aspect that can be easily fixed. Like, I don't know, you can only remove red attachments by buying a replacement from the shop or by picking up an unused attachment from the ground. Graphically speaking, it's alright even if some of the areas looks rather clean for a post-apocalyptic setting. Also, I think the God Rays could use a little toning down if you know what I mean. The performance seems stable as it runs well on RPCs, whether if it's a few months old or a couple of years old. The gore could use some work as the actual carnage seems underwhelming compared to older titles, while the cleaners being soaked on blood seems a little too extreme that you'll mistake them for a zombie in your first few runs because of how much they stick out. When it comes to the animations and the ragdolls, they're all good it seems, with the exception of the ridiculously fast animations on the pills. The card system opens a ton of possibilities for this game, as it changes your progression the more that you unlock and experiment with the decks. Let's just hope they don't put these along with any other content fodder behind surprise mechanics. Though the card system needs a hand-holding tutorial, along with a better interface, as it gets annoying to scroll through once you've unlocked a lot of cards. The corruption cards on the other hand are a pretty interesting addition to the game, but their existence poses a bit of a double-edged sword if you know what I mean. Sure, you can have a good time with a map that you've done a dozen times before by getting a new combination of corruption cards to spice things up, but it just takes certain combinations to make your run a living hell, as some of them don't change much, like the fog unless if it decides to be extra dense that day, and it spawns alongside the bird mutation, while the other corruption cards are far more drastic, like having the Hordes mutation, or burning riddance that makes melee a non-option. Bugs are found here and there in the beta, with nothing that I'll say is that game-breaking. Stuff like the Toll Boys being stuck on the ceilings and breaking their AI, ogres being able to hit you from behind cover, the specials being able to turn quickly, bots getting stuck on strange places, bots being stupid in general, music cues not playing from time to time, and whatever beautiful stuff that is posted on the subreddit. When it comes to what's missing or what else I can suggest, probably a double key binding support, more options when it comes to the resolution scaling that doesn't affect the HUD please, visible legs, better balancing between the healing items so that people would actually care to use the first aid kit and not just drown themselves in pills, a kill feed so that people can see who killed who, a modded realm similar to Vermintide, and probably an actual single player mode where you can just pause the game. When it comes to our worries, well, there's the monetization of the game post-release. What with a season pass, annual pass, already talking about adding new maps, new weapon skins, banners, spray paints, character titles, new characters, and even more special written mutations, along with some unannounced stuff, which would probably be new weapons, character skins, accessories, emotes, and more cards. I mean, the end screen that you get after reaching the safe room already looks like a place where you can show off your character's skin while doing a certain emote. Remember, this is coming from a game that already has a pretty high asking price of $60, more than what you'll usually pay for a cooperative shooter, which are usually on the $30 range. A game that stated they won't be supporting any mods. At this point, I'm surprised they even let you play the DLC maps, even if the hosts have them on. I thought they would just put those on a wall just to encourage more sales. So what's there left to say about it? To be brief, don't get it. Not right now. Not with the issues that it currently has. Not while they believe their competitive multiplayer could work. Not with how little we know about the full size of the game. And not with that price tag. Not yet. Not until the proper reviews comes out and whatever's hiding under the desk shows its ugly head a few months into the game's lifespan. But who am I kidding? A lot of you people already pre-ordered, yeah? Because none of you lot ever learn. I'd say it fills a niche if it stays true to its identity, and it stays far away from Left 4 Dead, as getting compared to it is just not going to work on its favor. It's a fun, tactical feeling zombie shooter that has the ghost of a battle royale in it. I swear, this was a battle royale zombie game before it turned into this. I just can't put my finger on why that is. Look, it has potential. We love their execution when it comes to the whole cooperative aspect of the game, but some things just feels off, lacking, or poorly thought out. That and the whole price along with the annual pass, mixed with the developer's previous project, Evolve, still ringing in our heads, and the publisher's focus on live service gaming just gives me and my group bad vibes all around. Some people will be fine with all the problems that we've talked about here, and if you are too, just make sure that you have 3 other friends to suffer with. I won't recommend it any other way. Well, that's it for this one. Tune in next time where I try to explain my love-hate relationship with Rage. I really need to get back to that thing. I thought putting it on the hardest difficulty will not bore me to death, but it did, just like another game that has something to do with malaria.